Welcome inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. My show revolves around the 4 L's: leadership, love, life, and lineage, and the ongoing story of real music made by real artists. The trendsetter, the one who is most authentic, trying to play from her guts and her soul the way her mentors did. She was part of the sterile universe of the 50s, growing up watching bands with striped shirts and acts, not real people channeling themselves, but an act. She pushed against the act by creating change. She went to Appalachia to find Doc Watson, going to find that Tennessee mountain home with Jim Keltner on the drum kit. This woman was not from the South, but her mentors were the Reverend Gary Davis and Mississippi John Hurt, who were, and because they were so authentic in their musical presentation, it rubbed off on my guest. To seek and discover for yourself has always been my guest's motto. Don't listen to critics or admirers. Dust off those rusty tunes that haven't been played for 40 years and play them with everything you got. My guest has played many songs over the last 40 years, but they're as authentic and fresh today because she seeks new beauty within and outside. Plant a seed, watch it grow. If it's not perfect or you flub a note, that's okay because it's the gateway to further creation. My guest has sustained because she has continually adapted to the changing terrain of what was once a record industry. She maintains relationships with musicians she may not have worked with in many years, along with opening doors to younger generations of artists who get to learn from a trendsetter. My show is and has been dedicated to bassist John Kahn. I never knew John or got to see him play, but I have done my best to connect with those who did, and today I get to communicate with someone who knew him more than most. Someone who recognized his genius and enjoyed spending time with him on and off the bandstand. That is special. And what's also special is that I've come full circle with another iconic band. I've interviewed all the Jazz Crusaders. I've interviewed Dizzy Gillespie's band from the 70s. I interviewed all of the Jerry Hahn Brotherhood. And now with my guest today, I have connected with every Jug bandmate from Jim Kweskin's group. That's special. And what's also special is that out of 400 guests, I can count on my hands the number of women I have interviewed. I need their input to shift the weight of perspective, to demystify the past and promote the present, to continually produce original songs and share the gifts that she received from her mentors. Time to send your camel to bed. Maria Muldaur, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Wow, what an intro. I'm floored. Thank you, Jake. That was quite something.
Well, you're welcome, Maria. That's my gift of these monologues. You know, they flow out of me in like 10 minutes. So
wow, okay. Well, I hope I can keep a pace with you.
My question is, Maria, did you ever get a chance to meet Duke Ellington?
I did. I met him twice.
Can you talk about that?
Sure. I'll tell you, the first time I met him was I remember this because Jenny was just a few months old, our daughter, and we, for the first time ever, we left her with a babysitter who just happened to be Mimi Farina, Joni Baez's younger sister. Sure. And Jeffrey Muldaur, my husband at the time, took me to see Duke Ellington at Boston Symphony Hall with Ella Fitzgerald performing with Duke and the band, and it was a show I'll never forget. And during the break, I went to find the ladies' restroom, and on my way, I ran into Duke Ellington and Clark Terry hanging out, having a smoke in the hall. And I was, of course, floored and taken aback, but I mustered all my courage and asked Duke for his autograph for Jeffrey, which I then gave him. And then the second time I met Duke, he came to, by then the Jim Kweskin Jug Band, and we were playing a long stint at the Troubadour in L.A., and we got there early one night, and so there were only a few people in the audience, and we noticed right front row and center the distinct profile of Duke Ellington with his cool little ponytail, who had been brought there by Mo Austin, the president of Warner Reprise, which was the label we were on. And we all marched through the house on up up to the dressing room, and I remember that we were all very excited, and Jeffrey was particularly nervous about the idea of Duke Ellington being right there front and center. And anyway, we composed ourselves, and the big question of the jug band, we were saying, should we do Mood Indigo? Because the jug band had recorded a very jug bandy version of Mood Indigo, and we argued back and forth, and then finally we said, we'll just do our show just the way we always do it. But we were a little more at attention, a little less goofy and zany during that performance, and I think Duke was bemused and amused by our presentation, and after the show he came up and met the band and was very gracious and wonderful, and he was particularly intrigued by Bill Keith, who was playing a pedal steel, a double neck pedal steel, and he spent a lot of time asking him a lot of questions because I could see his mind was working and thinking of all the amazing harmonic possibilities in having two necks and then working it with your feet and your knees at the same time. So who knows, if he had lived much longer, he might have written a suite for pedal steel. You never know. So those are my two memorable Duke Ellington remembrances.
You know, I interviewed Bobby Hutcherson, the vibraphonist, last week. He's he can't give a lot anymore as far as answers, but what he did say about the African history of jazz, he said, you can listen to Duke Ellington records, but when he went to the East Coast and he saw him, it's a whole different ball game. George Duke, rest in peace, said the same thing. Clark Terry, rest in peace. You mentioned him as well. But
yeah, he recently just passed.
He did, and I guess what I'm trying to get at, Maria, for my generation and younger generations is, in your mind, what did Duke Ellington mean to music at that time, insofar as his leadership capability? What did he do as a leader that stood out, and what made him so compelling?
Well, you mean at that time in the 60s when I was coming of age musically? Or
the thing, yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, he was somebody the jug band listened to a lot, even though, jug band music sounds very goofy and rudimentary. Part of our particular jug band was very informed by a lot of the early Duke music, and Fletcher Henderson, all the early jazz greats, and he just had a way of his mind was so fertile. I don't really know what to say because I'm not a schooled musician, but his sense of harmonics and his whole sense of orchestration was so far advanced from anything. It's still advanced when you listen to it today, and he was a great band leader, and he knew how to bring out the best in each of the players. He would write pieces that would feature certain particular players in his band at the time, and he knew who to assign which solos to, and he was also, like you were mentioning, he very informed by the early African American
right
musical influences, and brought them out in a lot of his pieces, like Black and Tan Fantasy and Creole Love Call and all that. I mean, he's just a monster. What else can I say?
Funny, when I'm with him, I forget how I missed him, playing little boy and girl, husband and bride. Do I care if the door don't lock? We'll just let it be. My man's home where he belongs, giving sweet love to me.
Music on the Jake Feinberg Show, sponsored in part by the Stereo Hospital, with over 40 years of experience repairing all types of home audio equipment, from vintage table radios to digital surround sound. At 4044 East Speedway inside Metronome Music, it's the place to take your turntable, CD player, tape deck, just about anything to do with a stereo. Call 722, and that's the number to call. All right, Maria, what do you got for us?
Oh my God, I haven't heard that in so long. That's from the from the Steelyard Blues album, isn't it?
That's you're darn right.
Soundtrack.
The soundtrack, and the name of that song is "Do I Care" with Maria Muldaur, just singing away the blues. I mean that to me was. Well, why don't you just talk about that, because you had some comrades that you were working with, but to me that's amazing stuff, and that's a hard soundtrack to come by. Tell me how that came about.
Well, that happened about a year before I ended up doing my first solo album for Warner Brothers. I think that was in the summer of '72. Mm-hmm. I may be off by a year, but geez, it's so long ago.
No, it's 70. You're right. You're right.
I was invited out. My friend Joe Boyd was co-producing a soundtrack with Nick Gravenitis for a movie called Steelyard Blues that starred Jane Fonda, Peter Boyle, I don't know. There were a bunch of kind of renegade actors, not the normal, Hollywood movie stars, were in this kind of quirky movie. And they had asked Nick Gravenitis to do the soundtrack. And so they called on me because they wanted to have different styles of music in the background and at certain pivotal moments have certain kinds of songs. And they knew that I could sing country. They knew I could sing like Dolly Parton. They specifically had me do so that was their interpretation of a Billie Holiday style song. Most of the songs were written by Merle Saunders and, may he rest in peace, Mike Bloomfield.
Wow.
And so there was a 50s doo-wop song that Nick Gravenitis wrote. So I did a 50s doo-wop song, a Memphis Minnie type song that I actually co-wrote with Mike Bloomfield. That one, which was the Billie Holiday one, and then there was a Ma Rainey one, and a Dolly Parton. And they did this because it was a lot cheaper to get me to sing all of that than to actually get licenses and pay those, artists like that for use of their song in the, on the soundtrack. So it was a great experience, and all my favorite comrades were on that project. Michael Bloomfield, my dear John Kahn, the bass player, Merle Saunders, Nick Gravenitis, and Paul Butterfield, to name but a few. We had a ball, and I haven't heard that in years, but I thought it sounded pretty good.
I thought I was listening to the other day. I said this is definitely on the rotation, because you were just on fire, and I also just love. This is more of a contemporary question for you, but. As a talent scout, Maria, as I posted the interview this week on social media, people said, hey, I know the keyboardist with Maria, or I knew this guy used to play with Maria. I mean, to me, can you talk about what you look for as a talent scout with younger musicians?
You mean as a talent scout for getting people in my band?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like, what do you look at, the intangible things that you look for in musicians?
Well, I've been blessed to just work with the best of the best, so my standards are pretty high. But having said that, I look for someone who's playing from the inside out, not from the outside in. That's where I'm coming from musically, and if you're coming from that place, it's not so much about how many fancy licks and riffs you play, or how fast you can play, or even how great your tone is. It's all about what your intention is from inside, almost like your spiritual intention, and also your ability, because then when you're working with people, making music with people who are on that wavelength and trying to make music from that place and with that intention, you can have a really nice give and take kind of conversation musically with each other. Like someone will play a little lick, and if you're open and you're listening to everybody else and not just busily thinking about what your next lick is going to be, you can then just a beautiful little conversation takes place. And I know when I listen to old recordings, that's the ones those are the ones you can listen to 500 times over, where there was like a real open flow of of communication and musical exchange going on, and not like people, playing a set piece or a set chart by rote. It's not about, it should always be fresh. If you can find players like that, you're really lucky.
How do you, it's so important in the 21st century to communicate with human beings, and I just wonder, like, when you see somebody blowing too hard, or just, it's a showing off chops, how do you pull them back? I mean, is it nonverbal communication? I mean, I think it's important that you talk about other forms of communication other than, reaming somebody out or telling them something. How do you communicate with someone when they are overplaying and not in a dialogue?
And not what? I'm sorry.
They're not having.
Not in the dialogue.
They're not having a dialogue.
Well, one form of nonverbal communication is don't hire them again, or. I've become a pretty good band leader over the years, despite myself. When Jeffrey Muldaur and I went our separate ways, personally and musically, the last thing I was doing was thinking about, gee, I wish I could ditch this guy in the band we're in so I could have my big old,
right.
my big famous solo career. I came to it kicking and screaming. I kind of came to it by default and just learned over the years. And one of the things I learned was not to be too bossy. Because, you have to give the person a chance to open up and start to play before you kind of gently correct them. And also, I just stand in the front, and if the drummer is pushing too hard, I put my hand behind my back and I make a motion like I'm drawing a horse. I'm trying to slow down a horse with the reins, you know what I mean?
Right.
If they're dragging, I play a mean tambourine, so I kind of help lift the music, the rhythm and the groove along by that. And I have a pretty steadfast sense of rhythm, and I can, even just me and my little voice and my tambourine, I can really help keep a band exactly in the groove.
That was my introduction into the Jerry Garcia Band. I was doing some work with Maria Muldaur right after Midnight at the Oasis, and Amos Garrett and a number of those great musicians were working with her. And, of course, John Kahn, bass player with Jerry Garcia Band, was her boyfriend, and he sat in on bass a number of times at some of her shows. So, of course, we have rehearsals, and we do some shows, and John Kahn is paying attention to me. And, after, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 gigs, they even came, him and Maria came to the church I was playing for. They just wanted to know more about me. They asked me where was I playing. I told them, and they showed up a couple Sundays. They said, oh, wow, look at them out there. It was.
All right, so can you name that voice, Maria?
That was Melvin Seals, wasn't it?
You're 2 for 2. Well, 2 for 2 today. That's very good. That was Melvin Seals, a sweetheart of a guy. But I really would love you to talk about just going to see him at that church. Was he playing with you at that time, and you told John about that?
I was asked by another dear musical brother of mine, Elvin Bishop, whom I just adore, and he's a local homeboy here in Marin County.
I've interviewed Elvin, yeah.
And he was doing a show in Tahoe at a casino there, and he asked me to come and he was opening for Tina Turner. This was before her big comeback, and he asked me to come and kind of, as he called it, give his band a little class. He just wanted me to come out and sing a few tunes and just kind of class up their act. So I did, and that's when I first met Melvin, and he was just amazing. And so a little later on, when I guess when Keith passed away, Keith Godshaw, I had been in the Jerry Garcia Band with John, of course, for several years, and Ron Hutt playing drums. What a band. Huh. Anyway, so when Keith passed away, they were at a loss for what to do, and I said, I know someone who would be just fabulous in your band. I had become friends with Melvin and gone to hear him at his church because I love gospel music, and he's just a monster in every way. So I turned John and Jerry on to Melvin, and the rest is history. I mean, he played with them for a good many years.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, because the first time that you met John was it during the Pottery Pie or the